Jesus can be very appealing, especially when times are chaotic. John Hagee, in his book on worship, tells the story of Mrs. Monroe of Darlington, Maryland. She's a mother of 8 children. She had been shopping. She came home to a very, very quiet house. And you know, when you have that many children and it's quiet, there's probably something to worry about. She came in and she saw her children sitting in the living room in a circle. They were doing something with something, but they were very quiet. So she put down her groceries and she came over and she looked over their shoulder. And as she did, she saw in the middle of them 5 of the most adorable little skunks you can possibly imagine. She panicked immediately. She gave a scream, "Children, run!" And they did. Each one picked up a skunk and they went in 5 different directions. She screamed even more, "No, no, no." Her fears, her screams scared her kids, and the next thing you know, they squeezed their skunk just a little too much. Did you know that skunks don't like to be squeezed? There's a moral to this story. The moral to the story is simple. It's usually too early to panic. It's usually too early to scream. We're in this series that we've titled Hope in the Chaos, and it is a chaotic time, but I've asked the question over and over again, should Christians panic like the unbeliever? The answer is no. Today I'm going to take us to Psalm 46. Psalm 46 has become a favorite psalm for many people, and there's a reason for that. There's a lot of great terminology in it. It's not a long psalm. But what's in there are contrasts, very important contrasts. Contrast of good and evil, contrast of peace and war, contrast of joy and chaos. And God is involved. God is part of all of this. But not causing it, He is the answer to all of it. Life can also be a series of contrasts, can it? There can be pleasant days, but sometimes bad days. There's sweet moments, but there can be bitter moments. There's times when it's smooth sailing and other times when it's rough seas. There can be blue skies one moment and the next moment out on the horizon, dark clouds. Now we know what life is like. In the midst of all these different contrasts, it begs the question, what am I standing on? Do I have firm footing? Is my foundation sure? And that's what this psalm is all about. Your foundation will be shaken. Whatever you're building your life on will be tested. And inside this psalm, there are some really, really important concepts for you and I to hear today. If you and I would make God our foundation, it would really help us through all of the times of chaos. Psalm 46, I'm going to start reading with verse 1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Oh, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Why the God of Jacob? I'll come back to that in a moment. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations that he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow. He shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Yeah, sure enough, all through the Old Testament, God often was against the enemies of God's people. He warred against them on our behalf. That's what this is about. But there's an invitation there. Did you catch it? Come and see. Let's look back through history and see what God has done against the enemies of his people. He says, "Be still. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. There it is the second time. Why Jacob? Why does it keep mentioning him? We'll come back to that. This psalm begins with a statement of strength. We will not fear. At the end, there's a commandment. Be still and know that I am God. Those two are really closely related. First of all, this concept of fear. We know that we're not supposed to fear. The idea of no fear is really good theology. It's great theology. Out of all the commandments in the Bible, the one commandment that's repeated more often than any of them is the idea, do not be afraid. Why does God mention that so much to his people? Because there's a lot to be afraid of out there. Even good spiritual people can sometimes fall into fear. But God says, don't let that happen. A life that's controlled by fear is an absolute miserable life. Well, then there's this little phrase, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Well, that's not easy either if you're in the midst of pain. When the dentist, and you're sitting in the dentist chair and he's coming at you with a Novocaine shot and he says, now hold still, be still. You grab onto the arms of that chair, your whole body stiffens, and when that needle comes in, oh my goodness, you're trying your best to hold still, but it's not easy, is it? My grandson comes in. He's been playing in the fort in the backyard, ran his hand down a railing. He comes in with a large sliver, and oh my goodness, you look at it, it's big, it's deep. Ben, that sliver has to come out. And so I grab the tweezers, I grab a needle. Ben's only 3 years old. Coming at his palm with a needle, I might as well have been coming at him with a machete. He yells out, no! He pulls his hand back. Ben, that has to come out. If it doesn't come out, it could get infected. That could be much worse. But those alligator tears, boy, they're pulling at me. And I did what any loving papa would do in that moment. I called his grandma. Sometimes in the midst of pain, how do you just be still like this psalm suggests? That's not easy. It all comes down to those phrases that are weaved between the psalm. God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our fortress. We're talking here about foundations in life. And when you have God as your foundation, even when that foundation is shaken, even when that foundation is tested, you're standing on something solid. And it helps you through those testings. Jesus told a parable of two builders in this life. One is a wise builder, one is a foolish builder. It's a little children's song, but you know it. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. And the rains came tumbling down. The rains came down. The floods came up and they beat on that house. And the house on the sand went splat. It collapsed. Jesus said there's a wise builder also, and he built on the rock. And when the rains came down and the floods came up and that storm beat on that house stood fast. What's the difference? The difference isn't so much in the foolish and the wise. The difference is in between the sand and the rock. Throughout other Psalms, the Bible tells us that the Lord is the rock of our salvation. He is a firm footing for us. He is the foundation that holds and stands in place for us. So this psalm explains to us that God is our refuge. God is our strength. God is our fortress. There's peace when you're connected to God. In the city of God, there's this peaceful river that flows because he dwells there. And any place God is, there is peace. Even in the midst of mountains being shaken and the sea roaring and foaming, there's a peace when you're connected to God. God is looking out for us, even though it feels like a season of turmoil right now. God's trying to do what's best for us. A small sparrow found its way into my home. Oh my goodness, the chaos. Suddenly children were screaming and Bonnie was under a blanket and it was out in the garage and I was trying to shoo him out of the garage, but somehow a child opened the door at the wrong time and into the house he went. And then it was a series of banging into window panes, one after another. Once in a while he'd hit himself so hard he'd fall to the ground, fall to the floor. And I tried to throw a towel over him, but I'd miss him and he'd be up and flying around the house again. So I went out to get a broom, and I thought maybe with a broom I could just shoo him toward an open door. We opened all the doors, opened all the windows, and I'm holding a broom. But before I got back, the cats also discovered the sparrow. Oh my goodness, the chaos. Here I am with a broom in my hand trying to shoo the bird over. I'm kicking back at cats. Get out of here, get out of here. Finally, that bird stopped banging into closed windows and found an opening, and we watched him fly out. He flew up into a tree where he said to a bird next to him, "Did you just see that guy try to kill me with that broom?" Sometimes when God is trying to move us on our spiritual journey, it's not always a smooth journey. God uses rough roads to develop who you and I are. He'll ask us sometimes to do something hard because it will be something good for us down the road. It's exactly what he asked of Jesus. Today is Palm Sunday. Today is the day that we pause and recognize that Jesus rode triumphantly into Jerusalem on the last week of his life. That last week, Jesus knows what's coming ahead. He absolutely knows what's going to take place. There will be a moment of suffering, a moment of torture. There will be that moment on the cross, and then he will die. Jesus knows all that is coming. What a hard road he's asked to do. But you know what? That hard road for him blessed us so much. There is a virus that has a hold of mankind, and it's called sin. And that virus has only one antidote. There is only one healing for that virus, and that's Jesus Christ. And so Jesus comes and he dies in our place so that you and I might find the healing that God wants for us, the grace that he wants to give us, the opportunity to one day be in that city, that holy city of peace. It all comes through one name, the name of Jesus Christ. Who can have it? Any of us can have it. Oh, I said I'd come back to that little phrase, the God of Jacob. Isn't that curious that God would identify himself as the God of Jacob? Do you know Jacob's story? It's found in the book of Genesis if you want to look it up. But the bottom line is this: Jacob was no angel. He had made a series of plenty of mistakes in his life. He had sinned greatly. And yet here is God who's saying, even this man, with all this baggage behind him, I can still be his God. And if God can be the God of Jacob, then God can be the God of Ron. And God can be your God as well too. Oh, please today, let God be your God. Let him be your foundation. Let him be your fortress. Let him be your refuge. And if you allow that to happen, and it all takes place through Jesus, you will have the firm footing you need and the hope you need to deal with the chaoses of our time.